time will prove. Yes, only time will prove if I have lost my way. 'Cause I hear tell about a heaven in Alberta, where they've got all hell for basements. Yeah, I have lost my way, but I hear tell about a heaven in Alberta, where they've got all hell for basements.
Hi, everyone. Frankie here, New West Reset. Hello. Welcome back. Thank you very, very much for joining me here for New West Reset Live, the show. Where are we at here? Episode number 31, New West Reset Live. So thank you very much for shooting in, joining me here for another show. It's Friday. Thanks for kicking off your weekend with yours truly here. It's 6 p.m. local time, mountain time, here in southwestern Alberta. It's beautiful. Beautiful here today. Purdy, Alberta. It's currently 26 degrees in the Celsiatory scales. That's it's not too bad. That's like mid 80s Fahrenheit. It was a beautiful sunny day today. We had some wind warnings for tomorrow, so who knows. But today, beautiful. All week, not too bad actually. Starting last weekend was really nice, and the whole week pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah, it's hey, you know what? It's it's Canada, and we're creeping up on fall / getting into close to winter, so you know. It's a crapshoot, right? Anything could happen. Could get a blizzard or a hailstorm at any second, but we could also still get a tornado or two. So, you know, it's that hanky time of year, right? Because at night it's getting chilly, yeah, between 5 and 10 Celsius. That's, you know, it's not great. That's like in the 40s Fahrenheit-ish again, you know? It's not super. But during the day, it's great. So that's when you know that it's, you know, snow's around the corner. It's going to be creeping up on the guy. Old man Winter's just going to tap me on the shoulder. And when I turn around, he's just going to give me a hoof right between the pins, if you know what I'm saying. He's going to tap dance on the old beanbag. Anyway. Thanks for joining me here. Episode 31. We're going to be looking at the mound-builders and the giants of Canada. Ancient giants, well, ancient in terms of, you know, pre-European contact and older, but also fairly recent. Sort of, there was this fascination in the Victorian era with all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, we've seen this, right? Things like all kinds of crazy, I don't know, photo manipulations where people like to get their photo taken in portrait, right? Back in the Victorian era, but then have the photo doctored so that they were holding their own head in their lap. You know what I'm saying? Like stuff like that, right? Or juggling their wife's head, like 6 of their wives' heads, or it's just crazy stuff, right? But there was also a fascination with things like that were tied into the circus and the traveling tent shows and medicine shows, not only here in the quote New World, in North America and down in Central and South America, with again circuses and medicine shows, but across the pond over in Europe and stuff too. Same thing, right? And over in the UK as well. Where that's where you get your crazy snake oil salesmen, but you can also get jugglers and I don't know, acrobats and all kinds of crazy shows and stuff. And along with those would be a circus or something. But then also, and if you'll have to excuse the language, but using parlance of the times, you get the sideshow freaks, right? You get I don't know, the hairy wolf boy, or the really enormous obese lady with the beard, or the freakishly strong guy, or the sword swallowing guy, fire eating guy, all that stuff. And amongst these were giants. And there's a lot of photos. We've seen tons of photos online of giants, but there's two in particular up in Canada, where a guy looked into it there, Bud, and found these Canadian giants that were pretty famous. So we're going to have a look at that too. But before I get ahead of myself there and get too crazy with the verbal diarrhea, let me just say hello to everybody in the box. How's she going there, Bud? Old world Mi'kmaq, good to see you. Good to see you. Liz is here. Howdy. Welcome. Isabella Live 2.0 and internet person. Turtle. Thanks for shooting in, Turtle. Good to see all of you. Holy smokes, what's going on here? Speaking of Isabella Live 2.0, look at this. Thank you. My goodness. Old Man Winter like that. Yeah, Old Man Winter's like that. All right. That's to sneak up on a fella. When you're walking around in your sandals and your sunglasses, maybe you're going to throw some kind of dead critter out on the grill, and it's a warm, early fall, late summer, early fall day. You're just minding your own business. You get tapped on the shoulder. You think somebody's going to hand a guy a cold beer to go with that barbecue. No, Old Man Winter, sucker punching you. Especially up here in Canada. You know how she goes there, Bud. But thank you very much. That's a guy's very first super chat here on the channel. So thank you. I appreciate that. We should do a little something special. Here for that, I think. Yeah. Let me put that back up there and let's see what a guy's got going over here. See what's going on here. Yeah, here we go.
Hey, we got a super chat over here. Put that in the Frankie Fingers Fund, Thank you.
So yes, thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's great. It's gonna go into the Frankie Fingers Fund over here. That'll go to the channel. That'll be for gimbals and equipment and. I was going to say a new flashlight, but I just got a new flashlight at the beginning of the summer. The guy goes out and does a lot of hiking and camping and stuff. It's always good to have a flashlight. So I just got a new flashlight. And I've gotten a habit of bringing it with me for the boots on the ground. Sometimes we're looking underneath the front porch and I can see that there's semi-buried window under there, but I get in real tight under there in like the lattice work or something under the porch, and the light is crappy and you can't see it. And it sucks. Team Heat. How's she going there, Bot? How you doing there, eh? Good to see you. Yeah, the phone has a flashlight, but then, the battery, right? I found that out the hard way last Saturday. Speaking of beautiful weather. Last Saturday, went to that Heritage Park, that Pioneer Village Living Museum, where they've set it up like a 1900, the year 1900-ish town, prairie town. But actually, as you make your way through the park, you start off in the 1860s to 1880s in the early settlement days. Then you go 1880s to 1900, and then you get into the town, which is right around 1900. And some other parts are just after that. And it was really cool. I met up with my buddy Vince there, and I was taking so much footage because we were there all day. Place opens at 10. We met at 10. We had breakfast and coffee. So we started the little looky-loo walkabouts in that park there, probably 11. And the place closes at 5. And they were practically kicking us out of there because we were some of the last people out of there. Because a guy wanted to ride the streetcar trolley, ding, 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 clickety-clackety, out of the park back to the main gates. So we had to stick around and do that for sure there. For sure there, bud. Speaking of a fellow Calgarian, my buddy Bernie's here as well. Crypto Alchemist, my fellow Calgarian Tartarian. Targaryen. Yeah, Heritage Park is awesome. I mean, it's an indoctrination park in a sense, right? It's just in terms of it's reinforcing the Wild West, wild cowboys and Indians, and the Northwest Mounted Police, and the Hudson's Bay Fur Trading Company narrative. And there was nothing out here but the savage primitives and buffalo and all that, right? But it's beautifully set up, and there is a lot of historical accuracy there because these buildings were actually moved to the park. And from what I understand, and this could all be, again, part of the diluting a guy's brain a bit, but from what I understand, they're not going to move a building from its original spot into the park to preserve it unless they can trace the building back to when it was built, and they've got all the paperwork and stuff, because they've got to have a little portfolio dossier story around this building that adds to the narrative of the park as a whole, right? But it is amazing. The train museum there is cool. They got an old car museum. They've got sort of a Victorian era amusement park. Hey, you'll see it. You'll see it. That's coming up Sunday. And that's a long one. That's an hour and a half. A guy took 2.5 hours worth of video footage, to the point where I filled up my phone. So I had to upload some up into the cloud there, into the Dropbox up into the sky cloud. The box on the cloud, you drop it in the box. It's a drop box. So you're putting it in a box, but the box is up on a cloud. I don't know. And still, after that, then my phone started running out of juice. So I had to find an electrical outlet to charge my phone, because a guy brought his charger, but I don't have a power pack thing, which that's Frankie Fingers fun. That's another thing I could use. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So thank goodness my buddy Vincent was there with me, not only for company and because he was enjoying reading the plaques, and we were getting a good laugh out of some of the stories they were trying to tell, pass off as historical fact. But anyway, not only that, the last, half hour of footage that I shot in that place was on his phone, because the place is pretty historically accurate in the sense that it was hard to find an electrical outlet to plug a guy's phone into. So, a fella could charge it up a bit there, put some juice in her. I had to go into the restaurant, which we went in there to have lunch anyways. But even in the restaurant, finding a wall outlet near a table where you could be seated, yeah, it was crazy. So yeah, the setup in that place is great. And we had a great time, and it was awesome. So that video is coming up this coming Sunday. Is going to be your Sunday video upload, Sunday the 17th. That's Heritage Park. So I managed to edit the darn thing down a little bit. I got it from 2.5 hours down to an hour and a half ish, there and abouts. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should get, a guy should get off his duff and figure out how to chop up these longer videos into chapters so that you can watch a couple chapters and go do other stuff, and then come back later, a couple of days later or whatever, and then just select the next chapter that you want to continue from. Been meaning to do that. But anyways, that's coming up, so I don't want to talk too much more about it. We're here to talk about the mound builders and giants of Canada. And speaking of Bernie, he's sitting down by the Elbow River right now. Nice. Beauty there, bud. Yeah, speaking of Bernie, crypto alchemist, Burn-Eye, mine's third eye, the science guy, felt the bow tie. He looked at some stuff down in Medicine Hat area, had smashed in Buffalo Jump and the Alberta Badlands in sort of south to southeastern Alberta, sort of southeast of where we live here in Calgary anyway. And there's a lot of evidence that he saw from the boots on the ground that he was doing out there in these sort of open fields, pastures, and, you know, farmland, ranch land, that these were big earthworks. And this was kind of new to me. I thought, well, in Alberta, you know, this seems pretty far north. And again, maybe it's just my own brainwashing of the official story, right? But it seems pretty far north and extreme weather for people that were supposedly nomadic and following herds of migrating animals, whether it's caribou in the north regions or buffalo in the Great Plains and the prairies here in the south and in sort of the mid south. So I kind of thought, well, why would they sit still long enough to build these ancient massive mounds or earthworks, right? In a more temperate climate where aren't extremes of hot summers and freezing cold winters with lots of snow and back and forth. You know, when it's more stable, maybe a little more predictable, the seasons aren't as harsh. You have maybe a longer growing season. That seems to be more conducive. There's a big word for a fellow. More conducive to a people's kind of staying put. But the thing is that there were both types of peoples in terms of Aboriginal First Nations here in Canada specifically. There were the nomadic types that followed the migrating herds, and then there were the ones that decided to hunker down and build permanent structures. And they would supplement the hunting that they did by hunting wild game rather than following herds of buffalo, let's say. They would supplement that with farming and hunting and gathering, right? So they would farm, hunt, and gather wild edibles, wild eating stuffs to eat, berries and roots and what have you. But when I kind of looked into this a little further, there's a couple of things that kind of baffled me, because I've heard of mound builders in the United States, right, in the Mississippi Valley, and even in the southern regions, right? You had like these different sort of southwestern tribes that built massive earthworks that aligned with celestial bodies and so on and so forth, much like, you know, the Aztecs and the Mayans and the Incas. You know, and for a long time, I think they tried to cover up the fact that coming all the way, if you follow the Mississippi all the way up even into Ohio, which is in the Great Lakes region, there's these massive mounds. Now, some of them were burial mounds. Some of them are old structures. Some of them are complexes that are a combination of both. And again, just by my own indoctrination, I thought, well, why would they come up here into Canada, right? Again, as if there was like a border separating what was the United States and Canada, you know, like hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. You know, like it's not like there was, you know, border crossings and you had to go through customs or anything like that, right? You know, it's not like when you look at it, you know, on a map or on the goggle, you know, it's not, there aren't lines there, right? Like there are in maps. So I kind of had to, you know, once a guy gave his head a shake and kind of said, well, okay, well, wait a second here. We're just talking about arbitrary borders. So why wouldn't there be mound builders from ancient indigenous First Nations civilizations up here in Canada too there, bud? I mean, we could do it too, eh? Jeez, don't rule us out all the time there, bud. We got the dome buildings and the ancient old world structures and castles and star forts up here. So why not have mounds and giants? Logan is here. Logan Rothrod's welcome. Howdy, good to see you. Thanks for shooting in. So let me just start by just showing you kind of where we're at. We're kind of the area that we're talking about here. And by the way, if you're just shooting in and joining a guy, once again, thank you very much. Welcome. Frankie here, New West Reset, and this is New West Reset Live, episode 31. If you haven't already, consider giving a guy the old like-a-roo thumbs up thing. It'd be awesome. And that just kind of helps push me out into the algorithm a little bit. You know the routine. And hey, if you're new here, welcome. Thank you. If you're considering subscribing, hey, I'm not gonna drag you over the coals or nothing, but it'd certainly be appreciated here as we make our way to 1,300 in the channel. So, anyways, we're talking about this sort of area, like and by the way, these ancient mound builders in the U.S. It's all up in through here, Mississippi and Tennessee and Missouri and Illinois. I know that annoys a lot of people when I jokingly say, I know it's Illinois, but anyway, Illinois, Indiana, up in Ohio. And now you're creeping up into the Great Lakes. I mean, Canada is right over this stupid little line here. So again, it's not like these indigenous people, as they're doing their own natural migrating and exploring and expanding, there's no reason why they wouldn't follow the shoreline of these lakes and just kind of go, wonder what's up over here there, bud, right? Sure, I could see them being hesitant coming up here and up here where it's colder than a witch's elbow. But in terms of the type of land, geography, topography, vegetation that you see here, and even climate to a lot of extent that you see here, is the same here. All the resources are the same, the trees are the same, the foxes, the deer, the beavers, everything the same. You can fish in the same lakes. So it's no different for them to be here, building massive earthworks, or being right here, or over here, or over here. Or follow the St. Lawrence and end up over in Eastern Canada. But the crazy thing is I'm originally from the East. I'm originally from here, Montreal. And I'd never heard of mounds, burial mounds, earthwork mounds, either or, anywhere in Canada. I barely heard of the ones here. Basically, what we're taught in school is, the Hopi and the Aztecs and the Mayans and the Incas, and then our own indigenous peoples, the ones that sort of follow the herds of buffalo through the prairies and the Great Plains, the Plains Indians nations, for lack of a better term. Then some of the Eastern ones that specialized in fishing and hunting and fur trapping and so on and so forth. And then the ones here on the far East Coast and on the West Coast, highly specialized fishing, entire industries, little towns and little indigenous cities built around fishing, very complicated and sophisticated fishing industries, which they would trade with other nations, all in their area. So these lines obviously didn't mean anything, but I was caught in that mental trap. Oh, if there's stuff down in here, why would they bother coming up into Canada? As if, again, they got to go through customs or something stupid like that. So I started looking into it, and this is the area that Bernie was sort of looking around. It was in here. So tonight we're going to look a little bit in this area, but we're mostly going to be concentrated in and around the Great Lakes region. And surprisingly, we're going to end up in one of our favorite provinces in Canada because it's so crazy, is Nova Scotia. I mean, you think part of the official history is, some of the earliest settlements in Canada were, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, kind of in this sort of, because you could come into this sort of bay, and then it's easy access into this and then down into the St. Lawrence River and make your way to the Great Lakes. So, you got a lot of opportunity here for harbors and ports and stuff. So, it's been developed for such a long time and has such an early narrative or late narrative. The narrative for Nova Scotia goes so far back that you think there wouldn't be any surprises, especially from a kid from out east. You'd think I would have heard of it. But there's crazy stuff going on in Nova Scotia. So we're kind of mostly looking in the east here tonight. How's everybody doing there in the box? Everybody doing all right? Probably, yeah, yeah, checkpoints, right? You're just crossing the plains, following buffalo, and all of a sudden a Mountie rides up on a horse. Whoa, where do you think you're going there, Chief Ten Bears? Well, I'm just following the buffalo there, bud. No, you can't be coming up here, eh? Like, this is Canada there. You're coming from the States. You can't just come across here. Can you imagine? Like 2,000 years ago. That would have been hilarious. Maybe that's what some of these old buildings out in the middle of nowhere were. Maybe they were checkpoints. Maybe they were border crossings. Anyway, probably one of the most famous earthworks, mounds, sites is Manitou Mounds in Winnipeg, or near Winnipeg in Manitoba. I'm going to butcher the name of this thing. Nekachiwano. No, it's Kena Chiwano. Kena Chiwano. It's not easy to say, but it's super famous because it's famous for these mounds. So the Kena Chiwano Historical Center, or Manitou Mounds, is Canada's premier concentration of ancient burial mounds. Manitou Mounds National Historic Site, as it was once called, is a vast network of 30 village sites and 15 ancient burial mounds constructed from approximately 5,000 BP. What the hell is BP? During the Archaic period to 360 BP. What the hell is BP? Somebody tell me? Is it going to tell me? BP. Before present. That means BP time is always changing because it's like 1,000 years from now, then its time isn't going to be 5,000 BC. It'll be 6,000 BC. But it'll be BP, not BC. See how dumb that is? Buffalo Budbuster. That's right. We're going to pat you down, see if you got trying to bring any of that Canadian cannabis back across the border when you're riding your buffalo. Anyways, it's one of the most significant centers of early habitation and ceremonial burial in Canada. It's located on a river stretch known as Long Sault Rapids, on the north side of Rainy River, approximately 54 clicks or 35 miles east of Fort Frances. Of course, it's near Fort. In the Rainy River district of northwestern Ontario. Oh, sorry, this one's in Ontario. I thought it was in Manitoba. My bad. There is a big one in Manitoba, too, we'll look at. It's National Historic Site designation, 1969. So in its Ojibwe name, And there's the area in red, apparently is their nation or their area. It means place of long rapids. Okay. It's also known as Manitou Mounds National Historic Site. And Rainy River Burial Mounds, Armstrong Mounds. Okay, sure. So it's strategic location at the center of major North American waterways, created a vibrant continent-wide trading network. Having direct contact with European fur traders and explorers of the 17th century, Aboriginal people continued to live in the area throughout the period of the fur trade and settlement areas. Kinachiwanung permitted easy access to and interaction with people from other areas of the continent. It came to be known as a gathering place where people would trade, share, celebrate, and mourn. The Ojibwe and their ancestors used the prominent sets of rapids along the Rainy River to fish. Because of the rapids never froze, fish were in abundance during every season, thus supporting larger populations. So yeah, there you go. So sort of in this area here. So very close. This is Manitoba here. So very close to Manitoba, almost right on the border. If you're seeing that little dot there on the map. This is Manitoba here. The border's right there. So far western Ontario. You can see again that there's a photo there. So it's, waterways, very important. And we talk about this all the time. Not only just here on my channel, but in the community as a whole, about the significance of waterways and access to water, whether it's lakes, rivers, or rivers that flowed to lakes, or lakes that were in close enough proximity to one another where they could build a canal between the lakes. It's in relation to, what we call star forts. And they did make mention of forts in that area as well. So I thought that was very interesting. Travel the party boat with that band, at Calgary Clutch Club. Oh, I didn't realize that was a band in Calgary. Guys got to get out more, I guess. Yeah. It's pronounced Sue as in Sault Ste. Marie because we're funny that way. For sure there, eh? We got to just put our own Canadian spin on it there, bud. How are we going to pronounce it? Salt? Salt? It's not salt, as in table salt or road salt for Canadians. Put that salt on the road. Don't put it on your corn niblets. Put it on the road so we can get around here for 6 months out of the year in the winter. Thanks. Yeah, we got to pronounce it Sue, like Sault Ste. Marie. Salt's already taken, so we're just going to pronounce it Sue. Yeah, but Sue's taken too. Yeah, but it's spelled different. The spelling on this one's too close with the salt and the salt. The vault isn't spelled VU. Vault with a V, you see? They confused the language, right? It's not that they necessarily we were given, the fall of the Tower of Babel. It's not that we were necessarily given different languages so that we were confused, couldn't understand each other. The language was confused. That was goofy stuff like that. Anyway, now we're going to get into the. By the way, we're also broadcasting simultaneously over on the Rumbles there, that fighting network over there. So if you're watching on Rumble, welcome. Thank you very much for shooting in, joining a guy. Appreciate it. Hope you're enjoying the show. CC14 over there on the Rumbles, joining. Good to see you. Thank you very much. Thanks to everybody who's been joining me over on the Rumble, the BitChute. It's good to see all of you. Appreciate all that support. It's awesome. It's awesome. Okay, so now we're going to get into the Manitoba stuff there, bud. This is from an article called The Mound-Builders of Manitoba. It says it right there. This is from a links in the description, by the way. It's a journal article from the library. So a few, at least, if not many, of the ancient mound builders of America found their way into the Canadian Northwest. On the banks of the Red River, whoops, just trying to figure out how, there we go. Is that a little better? On the banks of the Red River in the parish of St. Andrews, about 17 miles northeast of Winnipeg, there's a group of 4 mounds, 2 on each side of the river. The first on the west bank was originally quite large and subconical in shape. Note that, subconical. But one side of it was leveled down by the early settlers. In making a roadway along the fronts of their farms, and the other side has been considerably worn away by the gradual widening of the riverbed, leaving only an elliptical ridge about 100 feet long and 10 feet high. Of course, the early settlers leveled the thing. Human bones are frequently exposed on its barred sides, especially after heavy rains, and some years ago, an attempt was made to open it, which resulted in the finding of a number of skeletons and various other relics. This mound is very conspicuously situated on a high point at a sharp angle in the river, and it commands a fine view up and downstream, as well as of the surrounding country. The second is a very small mound and stands about a quarter of a mile back from the riverbank and nearly half a mile north of number 1. In a large field of comparatively level ground, it is only 3 feet in height and has never been touched. The other 2 mounds of this colony are situated on the opposite or east side of the river and are a little farther to the north, on a gentle slope facing west, yada, 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 yada. They are alike in shape and size, being oval, 65 feet long, 55 feet wide, and 7 feet high, connected by a shallow ridge or embankment over 300 yards in length. 3 football fields. Oh, 3 American football fields, eh? Yeah, I'm not too familiar with the language Ojibwa, to be honest. Not many Ojibwa out here in Alberta. No, we got the Blackfoot and the Sioux, so on and so forth. But yeah, so this thing's pretty big. 300-yard embankment kind of connected the two, which is supposed to be a natural elevation until it cracked with the drought last summer and it fell in at several points. Or it was thought to. It was supposed to have been. In other words, it was thought to have been natural until after some rain, it caved in, and a number of oak and poplar trees from 6 to 12 inches in diameter are still growing upon them. The most northerly one of this pair was partially opened in 1866 by and you'll have to excuse the parlance of the time, by the half-breed. So in Manitoba, I'm thinking by half-breed they mean half indigenous, half European, probably Métis. So half French and indigenous. On whose land it stands for the purpose of making a root house. So he was going to repurpose the thing. 2 years ago, it was further explored by members of the Historical Society. So he thought it was a mound and he was just going to hollow it out and make it like a sod hut or a root house. And then he realized, oh, it's an actual structure that's buried. Yeah, mixed race. Yeah. Yeah, this was written in the, when was this written, by the way? 1908. So you'll have to excuse the, the language used. Let's see. Pottery, pipes, and beads were taken out of on both occasions, but nothing of any special interest has thus far been found. The fourth or last one of the group, however, contains some interesting relics such as neck ornament or pendant manufactured out of seashell with the profile of a female face engraved on one side of it. The nose is straight, the eyes are large and prominent, and the mouth is finely cut, and the hair made up into a long, tapering cone. The hair made up into a long, tapering cone. There's not the slightest resemblance between this and again, you'll have to excuse the language, and a squaw's face. Squaw is sort of derogatory term for a female indigenous woman. But anyway, moving on. Of the present day. The next is a small hatchet of red pipestone with the outlines of a strange-looking quadruped roughly cut on both sides of it. And also on one side, a faint representation of some other animal, like a beaver in the rear and a bird in the front. The third is a sort of a breastplate of gorget, made of fine clay of yellowish color. It's only about the thickness of a school slate or like a blackboard, 3 inches long by 8 wide, and bent almost double with 4 perforated holes on each end. The other side marked with shallow longitudinal grooves, 1/2 inch apart, and which are in turn closely throughout, not artistically nicked crosswise, as if done while in a plastic state. The fourth is a very large stone hammer weighing 13.5 pounds. So yeah, a lot of interesting stuff found. And by the way, links for all of these are down in the description below. So if you want to kind of look into this along with, or look into it a little deeper, we're just going to kind of surf and skim a little bit of this, because there's a lot out there and there's a lot of ground to cover. So, because the guy could go on for a long time. I mean, I was shocked. I didn't hear about any of these. I mean, Montreal, Quebec's not that far from Ontario. It's not that far from Nova Scotia or from Manitoba, for that matter. Hey, there's our old friend, hidden at plain sight. Good to see you. Welcome. Away from the Netherlands. Good to talk to you. Guten Tag. So this is from the Manitoba Historical Society. It's from an article called Mound-Builders. And this is 1857. Guy by the name of Henry Hind. He was a teacher at the University of Toronto, and he left that position to serve as a geologist in the Canadian government's expedition to appraise the territory in the Northwest. Go out there and see what's going on and see if there's anything left of any value after the reset that we can start scooping up. Okay, boss. So off he goes. So apparently he's credited with finding the mounds. Yeah, absolutely. Our educational system. It's because what they do is they do the opposite of what educating should be. And that is they try to dumb everything down. It's like, why are you trying to dumb down and boil things down to the lowest common denominator when it comes to a good education? It's quote unquote state funded. That's why. So because of that, it's paid through Canadian citizens' taxes in terms of public school, that is. So, they want to cut corners so they can wet their beaks and get the most they can, from the skimming off the top there from the taxpayers' money that's supposed to go to the education system. That whole routine. Anyway, let's get into this thing here from 1857 of the Manitoba Mounds. The mound Hind described in his journal as part of a group of approximately 70 such mounds in the Melita region, and one of over 100 mounds scattered throughout what is now southern Manitoba. The majority of these mounds have been assigned by modern scholars to two late woodland period archaeological complexes. These complexes, the Black Duck and the Devil's Lake Suresford, flourished in Manitoba between 900 and 1400 AD. At least they're giving us some time periods we can understand. Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. I agree. Headleyman, BC. Oh, we're going to be getting out to your neck of the woods soon there, bud. We're going to do up some Manitoba. Then we're going to look at some little bit of Nova Scotia out there, by. And then we're going to have a come on over to BC. Hey, bud. But yes, give a like. Thank you. Subscribe if you're new. Make sure you're still subscribed if you've been, shooting in and visiting a guy for a while now, and you're thinking to yourself, hey, where's Frank going? I haven't seen something from Frankie in a while. YouTube's doing this thing where they think they're doing channels like mine a favor by unsubscribing bot accounts, which actually are owned by real life flesh and blood human being people. So yeah, just check on that once in a while. Not only my channel, all the channels that you subscribe to. Make every once in a while, make sure you're still subscribed to. All right, so let's see here. Where are we? Many of the Manitoba's mounds contain burials. Some appear to be animal effigies. Still others have no known purpose. Archaeologists point to the remains of small ceremonial fires on the mound's burial surfaces, and to the inclusion of foreign materials such as copper and conch shell to support the theory that these ancient earthworks had a ritual meaning for the Aboriginal cultures that constructed them. They speculate that the cooperative labor which mound building entailed provided important ceremonial opportunities to cement relationships between different native groups in the region. Well, how often we've been talking about this in our community for years. These weren't isolated, not always necessarily, perhaps in some cases because of geography, or they're an island indigenous nation or something that were really, really far removed, and it would take them too long necessarily to, sort of island hopping, right? But, on large continents, there was trade, there was commerce, and they used the waterways. Now, finally, the mainstream are starting to wake up to this idea, because prior to that, it was just people that were either doing their own quote-unquote boots on the ground version of what we do now for investigating, when initially looking into these ancient cultures in the US and in Canada. But now, at least the average Joe has access to it because of the old interwebs. But prior to that, nobody was talking about this stuff. We were talking about it. We were saying these ancient cultures, used waterways as highways. They weren't barriers. Just because our modern civilization considers waterways as barriers, or uses them to draw, on each side of this river is a different country or whatever. Uses to draw lines on maps, right? But in the old world, that wasn't the case, and especially in the ancient world. Anyway, continuing with the article here. Modern scholars agree that Manitoba's mounds are the product of ancient North American Aboriginal societies. As a siren is going in the back, excuse me for that. This opinion was not held by their 19th century counterparts. The European Canadian discoverers of Manitoba's mounds interpreted their findings by turning an existing body of American theory about comparable structures in the United States. American mound scholarship had been. It's a fire truck going by, eh? Hope nobody's. His house is burning down or something. Hope it's not another Great Calgary fire. That would suck. American mound scholarship had been stimulated by a series of ancient earthworks located in the Ohio and Mississippi River valleys. So even they were saying, by this article, that, hey, Annie, good to see you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Old World Michigan is in the box. Thanks for shooting in. Good to see you. So yeah, even these guys were at first were saying, "Well, there's no way they'd come all the way up here, all the way down from Ohio and the Mississippi Valley." Right? So even these guys were, and these are supposed to be learned scholars that are supposed experts in the field, right? So this next piece we're going to look at, this is from the Canadian Museum of History, and this is from an online article, The History of the Native People of Canada. And this is a sort of a big sort of online, what is this thing? It's like an online exhibition. And this is volume 2, where they're discovering they're discussing 1000 BC to 500 AD. And this is sort of in the same area. This is more again in that Ontario province rather than in Manitoba. But very, very close, like within 100 miles of each other. And again, like super close to Ohio. Man, there must be something serious going on up there. This is the second fire truck rolling by now. You have to excuse the noise, everybody. Just having a little peekaboo out the window here just to see what's going on up there, eh? But I can't see. I don't smell any smoke, so far so good. But again, this is sort of the area we're talking about in here, is this sort of area here and in and around in here. And there's Ohio right there. And there's that whole, Mississippi mound-builders all the way in through here. So again, what do? Just get to the border and go, oh, can't go up in there, eh? That's Canada there, bud. No, of course not. Absolutely not. It's ridiculous. So again, this is the Ontario area. So late Western Shield culture should be viewed relative to the exceptional expanse and variety of territory occupied. Yada, yada, yada. Okay, here we go. On an east to west line, the culture was distributed from the border of Quebec across northern Ontario, throughout much of Manitoba, and into east central Saskatchewan. A straight line distance of more than 1,600 kilometers. So I don't know, it was 1,000 miles, I guess. It occupies lands as far to the south as northern Michigan and Minnesota. This expansive territory incorporated the northern and eastern margins of the Great Lakes, St. Lawrence Forest, and the Parklands, respectively, and the Boreal Forest and lichen woodland vegetation provinces. Vegetation provinces are categorized by different compositions of plant species within which animal resources become increasingly impoverished as one advances to the north. All right, so yeah. Further north you go, less vegetation and not around for as long. So less big game grazing on the said less vegetation. Makes sense. That's why caribou is so important in the northern territories here in Canada and up in northern Russia and so on, and up in the Scandinavian countries. Yeah. No, I don't smell smoke. If you're seeing smoke drifting across the camera, let me know. But it could be that a guy's just having a smoke. And I'm not endorsing smoke. Don't smoke, kids. Don't do that. It's not healthy. Anyway. So that's a big swath of land. I mean, if they can go 1,000 miles east to west from Quebec all across Ontario and into Manitoba and parts of Saskatchewan, then why couldn't they go from the Mississippi Valley or Ohio up into central Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Ontario, Quebec, right? Was there anything else here that yeah, again, they're giving that same time period, 500 BC is one other article we looked at. They're not dating it to like 5,000 BP or whatever, but 5,000 BP is only 3,000 BC. So, I mean, these articles are long. It talks about going in through Minnesota, up into Ontario, the sort of the western portion of the Canadian Shield, that sort of nickel belt in around Wisconsin and Michigan, and again Minnesota. That whole area. So they talk about all that in this article. But anyway, links in the description for that one as well. I love me some caribou. Delicious, actually. All them big games are delicious. Deer and elk and moose, caribou, buffalo or bison. A couple of places here where you can get buffalo burger, and there's, I think, one or two places you can get a buffalo steak too. I haven't tried the steak. I've had a buffalo burger, but buffalo steak seems a little excessive to a guy. It's like, all right, take it easy. If I want some kind of fancy steak, I could have venison. I could have deer, right? Hey, there he is. Hey, Eric. Good to see you. Old world hamster wheel cranes. How's she going there, bud? Good to see you, eh? Hey, it's all good. Don't you worry about it, man. Don't worry about it. Just good to see you. Don't worry about the time. Don't you worry about that at all. We're just kind of rolling anyways, after me blathering on for the opening part of the stream. And basically, we're just looking at a few articles online here because as I was looking into this topic of these mounds, and again, some are burial mounds, but some of them were actually structures. Some, the skeletal remains were found in, but some of them, other artifacts were found rather than remains. And then in some cases, both. They'd find skeletal remains, animal effigies, jewelry, pottery, the usual stuff, right? Like you would see in ancient tombs all over the realm. And it's thought, I guess, initially by the conventional idea that it was too far north for some of these quote unquote American ancient Aboriginal cultures, anywhere from 10,000 years ago to 500 years ago. Why would they migrate this far north if they were in Ohio or something like that? And it's really not much different, Ohio to Ontario. I mean, you can ride your bike from Ohio to Ontario in a couple of days. without a problem. Just throw a backpack and a tent on your back and hop on and just start pedaling along there, bud. Just pedal away. So this article here is from Turtle Mountain, the Surrey Plains. This is in Ontario as well. There's Devil's Lake. They talked about it a little bit in one article. They touched on it. Devil's Lake Suresford Burial Complex. And this is the one that was crazy to me because I'd never even heard of this, man. And this is the one that's just like 2 provinces over from me in Manitoba. They talk about archaeological density is the Devil's Lake Burial Complex, which is made up of hundreds of burial mounds scattered from southeast North Dakota to south central Saskatchewan. The greatest concentration of this burial complex in Canada is located near Suresford. So there you go. Out of this vast area, only one group of burial mounds have escaped civilization. The Suresford lineal burial mounds remain as one of the best preserved examples of mounds in all of Canada. So much so they were designated National Historic Site of Canada. The site is accessible to the public and protected by Parks Canada. Of course it's protected by Parks Canada. Look at this thing, man. These long lateral, and these aren't indentations or like canals or something dug out of the earth. These are mounds. This is piled earth. So whether it's structures here joined by something and there's something else here, whether it was ancient walls or something, they're calling them burial mounds, but you know. The people who left these mounds and others in this complex are known only as the mound-builders. They're thought to be related through common ancestry to or influenced by contact with the Mississippian peoples who lived along the mid and lower reaches of the Mississippi River. The idea of burial mounds spread from these Mississippian people who in turn drew their influences from Central American civilizations even further south. So at least they're willing to entertain that idea, as opposed to saying, well, maybe it was all one part of one ancient culture or one ancient civilization, considering they all existed in the same time period and had a lot of the same customs, building techniques, culture in terms of, I don't know, again, the jewelry using copper and gold and silver and animal effigies and using shells that have carvings in them and, you know, earthworks and waterways. But this was astonishing to me because I had never heard of this or seen this in my life. So the mound builders were a nomadic bison hunting society who moved about according to a seasonal cycle. Summering on the plains, the mound builders existed following the retreat of glaciers from the last ice age. About 10,000 years ago, the burial mounds at Suresford date back to 800 AD, over 1,000 years ago. These cultures buried members of their band who did not make it through the winter, mainly infants and the elderly. They laid the bodies of the dead in the earth about 18 inches down, curled into the fetal positions. How often do we see that as well, facing outward? The bodies were then covered with poles and sod before being topped with an almost impermeable layer of clay. The mounds in the complex vary in size and shape from single mounds to the long linear mounds such as those at this site. Then they get further into trade networks and so on and so forth. So I found that very interesting as well. Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that before too, that ancient Celtic or Celtic, however you want to pronounce it. Yeah, and that's the thing. Are we sure? Or were they were they used by, like, are these, some of these mounds, thousands, plural, of years old? And then, in the last 500 years or so, were they repurposed by the people who are now the current indigenous First Nations, the ones that come along later or rose later? So think of sort of, our, what you in your mind's eye envision when you think of, some of the indigenous native Indian in North America from, the 1200s, the 1400s, not the Dances with Wolves type of indigenous that we see in the, the Hollywood movies, because by then they're already quite influenced and westernized by, the European cultures. But prior to that, when contact was much less frequent and they only just maintained their own societies and cultures and their own trade routes and contacts, I don't know, I just find it to be quite interesting, because maybe the what we considered the quote unquote native Indians from 500 years ago onward, riding horses with feathers and bows and arrows and, all that indoctrination stuff, that Hollywood stuff. Maybe they repurposed these ancient structures and started placing their dead in there. But prior to that, maybe they weren't initially built as burial mounds. Maybe they were built as something else. Oh, and there's no arguing. It's a fantastic movie. I love that movie. Don't get me wrong. I love all of that type of movie, with the Wild West, the Clint Eastwood, like the Unforgiven, or Dances with Wolves, about the disappearing last frontier, all of that stuff, Last of the Mohicans and all that jazz. It's all good stuff. But I mean, it is Hollywood after all, right? So how we're doing here, we're about at the midway point here. So I'm thinking what I might do is just dip out here for a quick little break, just a quick little 5-minute-ish break, wet my whistle, then come back and we'll have a look at a couple of other interesting things here, and then we'll wrap it up. Propaganda AF. Propaganda is fuck, eh, bots? Yeah, for sure. But still, great movies. Yeah, LiDAR doesn't lie. There's a bird sanctuary in Florida that had a 3,000-year-old step pyramid under it. It was thought at first to be clamshells. Huh. It's pretty interesting. Well, again, when Bernie was out stomping around down by Head Smashed in Buffalo Jump, in and around the southern Alberta Badlands and close to Medicine Hat. Shout out to all the people living in the Hat. There's a bunch of you that visit the channel here that are locals here in Alberta, and there's a couple down in the Hat, a couple up in Edmonton, a couple here a few here in Calgary too, actually. But anyway, the stuff that he was seeing down there, I mean, it's, and this is by the narrative, this is where these peoples of the ancient past were living. It was all in southern Alberta, Saskatchewan, and then down into, Montana, and over and across into like North Dakota, and so on, right? So in a lot of respects, Canada is a huge country, the second biggest one by landmass. And there's vast tracts of land. So when you look at it like that, you might think it would be daunting for some of these ancient cultures to expand, these old world civilizations. But again, they viewed the world differently. They looked at these waterways and these lakes and rivers and oceans as a means of transportation. So they could travel very easily by using the lakes and rivers, and building canals. Anyway, let's see what I've got here. I'm going to share next week's midweek. Going to give you a sneak peek at the midweek. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Let's see what's coming up here for midweek. This coming Wednesday. Oh yeah, this one's interesting. Found some old footage that they say is construction of a tunnel for the San Francisco street tram or street trolley. This is from 1907, I believe. So we're going to hit it, and then I shall be back momentarily. All right. So here's your sneak peek midweek, digging out the San Fran tram. Because that's what I think they're doing on this, is they're just digging it out. But anyway, have a look for yourself. All right. We are back. So hope you enjoyed that. That was pretty neat. And if you're just tuning in, thanks for shooting in and joining the guy here. New West Reset Live, episode 31. Today we're looking at mound builders and giants in Canada. So we've shared a couple of articles, mostly talking about mounds, whether they were earthworks or structures or burial mounds, in some cases both in the same complex. Thousands of years old in some cases, a lot of them hundreds of years old. And many of these sites have hundreds of structures. Hundreds. This was all new to me, and I live up here in Canada there, bud. So I don't know what the hell's going on, eh? So where are we at here? 7:15 p.m., Saturday, September the 15th, Friday. Once again, thank you for kicking off your weekend over here at New West Reset Live. Appreciate it as always. If you haven't already, give a guy one of these. Links in the description below for all the articles we're covering, as well as for guys Rumble. So we're broadcasting simultaneously live on Rumble right now as well as the guys BitChute. Because once in a while, stuff will get pulled off the YouTubes. They don't like something, for whatever reason, and so it'll at least stay up on Rumble and BitChute. So what do you guys think of that? I know horses. In fact, there's one part of the video that you could see with that giant steam shovel that it's being rotated by horses. Not only are horses pulling carts down in there to carry away the loads of dirt being dumped in by the steam loader. Steam shovel, actually, is what those things were called. But because it's different footage, right? That guy just kind of edited it together, but it was supposedly a big construction project. But yeah, it's being rotated back and forth by the horses, as well as teams of horses pulling carts to take the dirt away. So those steam shovels are crazy looking things, man. Yeah, it looks like it's made out of an old train, right? Maybe those old locomotives, they used to smash into each other in the early 1900s. Maybe they would turn them into steam shovels or steam cranes too. Who knows? It does not look like it's powered by hamster wheel cranes. No, the top hat guys, they don't work. If you're seeing a bowler hat, the ones that are round on top, those guys will pick up a shovel or drive a team of mules once in a while. But the top hats, like Mr. Peanut or the Monopoly guy, those top hats, yeah, no. Like Fred Astaire dancing in his tuxedo type of top hat, those guys aren't lifting a finger. Yeah, they get the case of or maybe they're taking those blue pills or whatever those were that make you all crazy from the mercury. Mad as a Mad Hatter. Yeah, how many hamster power is that steam shovel? Yeah, no kidding, right? It's like that old Jerry Seinfeld bit about horsepower. He's like, the talks about the space shuttle rocket engines have something like 5 million horsepower each. Like, why are we still using horses to measure these amounts of power? Like, is it to further degrade and denigrate the horse and marginalize the poor horse? It's already been a beast of burden for thousands of years. We still got to, kick it while it's down. Hey, horse, I need you to pull this thing up to the moon. Can you get a few million of your friends gathered together around? Right? It's ridiculous. Anyway, let's see here. We got now we're getting into the meat and the potatoes here. Now we're getting into some of the good stuff. We're taking a quick trip out to Vancouver trip out to Vancouver, British Columbia here, out on the West Coast. And this is an article called The Forgotten Graveyards Under Victoria. It's right on Vancouver Island. So it's not even on the mainland for the love of Pete. The capital city is built atop one of the largest burial grounds of the pre-contact world. Whoopsies! We built the city on top of ancient pre-contact burial grounds. And in the photo here, it just says a group of Victorians pictured in 1920 using pickaxes to tear apart likely centuries-old burial mound near Petter Bay. Unfortunate name if you live on Petter Bay. There was a time not too long ago when digging up the bones of the dead was a popular Vancouver Island pastime. Yeah, the Victorians, man. See, they loved weird stuff. Weird stuff. Guy McNichol, proprietor of the Cadborough Bay Motel, made it a hobby to go dig up grave sites around the property and then mount the bones as conversation pieces in the motel lobby. What's in a skull? Lots of fun, declared a 1963 profile of McNeil in the Daily Colonist. This guy's a nut. Indigenous bones often sat alongside Cretaceous-era fossils and antique farming implements at the island's many community museums. The most interesting thing at the museum was a skeleton head that belonged to an Indian, quote unquote, or a school-age girl after a 1969 visit to the Courtney Museum. So this is a museum, and they're still putting artifacts that are thousands of years apart from one another by their own narrative timeline together. Nice job. Nice job, museum. MJL in the box. Howdy, howdy. Welcome. Good to see you, sir. Good day. How you going? In 1967, the Daily Colonist would feature a light-hearted column about doing errands around Victoria while toting around two Indigenous skulls dug out of a Salt Spring Island gravesite. Oh, that's nice. The skulls and I did some shopping, declared writer B. Hamilton. Just desecrating. I guess, I don't know, it's just, you couldn't swing a dead cat without finding ancient Indigenous graves, apparently. And then they're like, well, how come? Well, we better look into it. Whoops, we built the whole city on an ancient past civilization. The recreational desecration of graves has since stopped. I hope so. Hope so. Massive burial grounds were to be expected in what was once the most densely populated corners of pre-Columbian North America. Rivers filled with salmon, forests filled with berries, and vast stands of the largest trees on earth left the Salish Sea dotted with sprawling villages that could turn straits black with canoes and skies hazy with the smoke from cook fires. Matthews notes that the Rocky Point Peninsula, just across the water from Clover Point, has 515 visible burial claims, one of the largest mortuary landscapes on the northwest coast of North America. It's a big, massive boulder structures like this with a few, was that a seagull? Get out of there, you filthy seagull. The power and prosperity of the pre-contact Coast Salish was never fully glimpsed by Europeans, as smallpox had already chewed through the local populations by the time George Vancouver arrived in the region in 1792. Just like a traveler stepping into Europe in the wake of the Black Death, Vancouver encountered abandoned villages strewn with bones and ad hoc bands of badly scarred survivors. Yeah, that's because it's not long after the year 1700, the year from hell, that we talked about on a past live stream, isn't it? Where there was a suboceanic Pacific Ocean earthquake, apparently, that caused a huge tsunami and then possibly could have triggered a volcanic eruption in that same year, or vice versa. The volcanic eruption could have triggered the underwater earthquake. And by 1701, 1702, there was mass death from disease because the entire area of southern British Columbia, southwestern Alberta, and the Pacific Northwest was completely destroyed, not only by the immediate tsunami and volcanic eruption, but the after effects of, flooding and glacial waters melting and causing floods and landslides and mud flood, as well as volcanic ash in the sky, changing the local climate temporarily. So yeah, I thought this was really, really interesting. Here's a photo from 1890s. So there's this whole area is just strewn with these giant boulders. The uplands, like the rest of Oak Bay, was part of a 2,600 acre parcel of land acquired in the early 1860s by, oh, you guessed it, one of our favorite villains here on the channel, the Hudson's Bay Fur Trading Company, who exchanged 90 wool blankets to the Chaconin family group for its use as farmland. So yeah, we'll give you 90 blankets in exchange for all of this, all these acres of land. Jeez. So yeah, there's the thumbnail for the live stream. This is a survey team, 1906, just standing on top of ancient burial mound. So you can see all kinds of different mounds throughout Canada, whether it's these stone piles or whether it's massive earthworks, whether there were actual remains found in them or whether they were hollow structures, some with artifacts and bones, so on. Excuse me. So yeah, there's just a little bit more going on here in the article. Yeah, I should do a show on the Hudson's Bay Fur Trading Company. That's a good idea. Howdy, sir. Welcome, Sir Real Nil Mill in the box. Yeah, they want loan, not blank. So yeah, the link for this one in the description as well. I'll just touch on quickly on my own sort of backyard here, because I did find a little bit about some of these mounds that and some of this ancient civilization that could have existed as far as into Alberta here. This is Montopedia. This is like a Wix website. It's somebody's website. Anyway, written in 2022, or updated 2022 anyway. Government officials worked to eradicate evidence of the pre-contact North American peoples in the late 1800s, but they could not erase all their structures, in particular the thousands of man-made mounds that can still be seen today. Not to mention all the old world buildings and bridges and canals and towers. But that's neither here nor there. According to one source, John Wesley Powell, the leader of the first trip down the Grand Canyon, and one-armed to boot, and the director of the Bureau of Ethnology, United States, in 1894, directed archaeologists, etc., across the U.S. to send him any evidence they had of pre-contact peoples. More than 100,000 figurines, sketches of rock drawings, etc., were sent to him and promptly destroyed because he said there was no culture in the U.S. before contact with Europe, so the evidence could not be true. Yikes. But many of the more than 30,000 mounds left behind by these peoples in the Mississippi Valley, southern Canada, and West Coast survived these efforts. One of the largest mound complexes left by this culture was Marietta, Ohio. It's hypothesized that the road had no material purpose. Yeah, because they built a big road leading up to this thing, apparently. Native in the Americas did not have wheeled transport prior to contact, so such established road must have been constructed for a ceremonial procession. No mounds have yet been found in Alberta. Well, Bernie might have found some. Although they have been found as nearby as Saskatchewan, where Moose Mountain has been one of the best known prairie ones. Pilot Mound, Manitoba, is named after one in that area. A Quebecois-born interpreter, Jean L'Heureux, who lived in central Alberta in the 1860s and 1870s, observed that the mound civilization of the Mississippi River Valley could have extended as far as Alberta. And again, why not? If it's the same resources, topography, climate, and there's waterways, and they're already exchanging with the peoples there, then why not take it one step further and say, well, maybe it was all one vast ancient civilization that was here in the Americas. Maybe at certain times stronger than at other times, or what have you. So this is a nice little collection of just sort of a few areas, and then some notes from this guy's book from 1894. Mounds, Hatzig in the New Westminster area. That's in British Columbia. Similar to mounds can be found in various other parts of Western Province. Then they mentioned some in Ontario, elaborate mounds found, similar to those found in Ohio. While pottery discovered the earliest painting pottery can be found in Canada, similar to that found in Massachusetts. So the Ontario tribe was perhaps an intermingling of the two groups. Biggest town site is on the present Hiawatha Reserve in the Mississauga Indians and directly south of the present village of Keene near the mouth of the Indian River. That is also in Ontario. And it goes on and on. And then they say that Canada has a serpent mound. And I was like, what? So Serpent Mound's National Historic Site in Canada is in southern Ontario. 1906, Red Deer News talks of a call to protect a mound in Ontario. The only serpent mound in Canada is near Peterborough in Peterborough County. Local historian says he does not accept the theory that the mounds of North America were the work of an extinct race. All evidence goes to show that these mounds were built by the ancestors of our Indians, and mounds have been constructed by the Indians within historical times. Serpent Mounds in Ontario, the only known effigy mound in Canada. Situated on a bluff overlooking Rice Lake near Peterborough. Let's see. 60 meters long, 8 meters wide, and almost 2 meters high. Excavation indicated that the mounds forming the effigy were gradually built up between 50 BC and 300 AD. They're using BCE and CE there. But this is just Serpent Mounds was a sacred place visited periodically for religion. Yeah, that's what they always say. It unfortunately doesn't get into whether it, I don't think that it gets into whether it's aligned with any, celestial, the equinoxes, anything like that. But, oh, take care, Eric. He says dinner and the wife are here. Keep looking at that Celtic connection. Y'all have a great night. And thank you, Frankie, for everything. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Have a good one. Old World Hamster Wheel Cranes, our buddy Eric. Thank you. So yeah, it doesn't really get into any alignments, celestial alignments, or equinox or anything like that. But I'm going to look a little bit more into it because, again, just in the last few days, just kind of quickly looking into this for the show here, I was just like, wait a sec, there's a serpent mound Get out of here, man. It just doesn't make sense. But anyways, now for the good stuff. Giants. So not only did some of these mounds contain human remains, ancient human remains, because they were ancient burial mounds. And again, some were ancient structures that were not used as burial mounds. And again, they found all kinds of stuff in these things. Pottery, jewelry, and whatnot. But some of them, just your everyday run-of-the-mill giants. So giant found near Cayuga Township. So this is from newspaper, 1872, the Bloomfield, Pennsylvania Democrat, the Perry County Democrat, in Bloomfield, Pennsylvania. This is from Wednesday, October 16th, 1872. Page 1, front page news. Giant people found near Cayuga Township. What did I do? Anyway, let's here we go. A letter from Cayuga, something a Toronto paper, gives the particulars of a very remarkable discovery made recently by certain parties who were digging on a farm on the banks of the Grand River in the township of Cayuga. When they got 5 or 6 feet below the surface, a strange sight met them. Piled in layer, one on top of the other, were some 200 skeletons of human beings. Nearly perfect. Around the neck of each one, a string of beads. There was also deposited in this pit a number of axes and skimmers made of stone. In the jaws of several of the skeletons were large stone pipes, one of them which Mr. O. Wardell took with him to Toronto a day or two after this Golgotha was unearthed. Golgotha? What a great word. I never even heard of that word before in my life, but I like that word. These skeletons are those of men of gigantic stature, some of them measuring 9 feet. Some of the thigh bones were found to be at least half a foot longer than those of present generation. And one of the skulls completely cover the head of an ordinary person. These skeletons are supposed to belong to those of a rare race of people anterior to the Indians, in other words, prior to. Some 3 years ago, the bones of a mastodon were found embedded in the earth about 6 miles from this spot. The pit and its ghastly occupants are now open to the view of any who may wish to make a visit there. Golgotha Calvary, really? So like a cacophony, like a grouping of, a parade of. There is not the slightest doubt that the remains of a lost city are on this farm. At various times within the past years, the remains of mud houses with their chimneys had been found, and there are dozens of pits of similar kind to that just unearthed. Though much smaller in the place which has been discovered before, though the fact has not been made public hitherto. The remains of a blacksmith's shop containing 2 tons of charcoal and various implements were turned up a few months ago. The farm, which consists of 150 acres, has been cultivated for nearly a century and was covered with a thick growth of pine, so that it must have been ages ago since the remains were deposited there. The skulls of the skeletons are of an enormous size and all manner of shapes, about half as large again as are now to be seen. The teeth in most of these are still in almost perfect state of preservation, though they soon fall out when exposed to the air. Yeah, let's quit screwing around with this stuff, you clowns. It is supposed that there is gold or silver in large quantities to be found on the premises. Aha, and therein lies the rub. That's why they're digging around in here. They're looking for gold. They don't care about giant skeletons, really. Large quantities to be found on the premises, as mineral rods have invariably been, when tested, pointed to a certain spot and a few yards from where the last patch of skeletons was found directly under the apple tree. Some large shells, so again, shells, supposed to have been used for holding water, which were also found in the pit, were almost petrified. A good deal of excitement exists in the neighborhood, and many visitors call at the farm daily. The skulls and bones of the giants are fast disappearing, being taken away by curiosity hunters. It is the intention of the owner to cover up the pit very soon. The pit is ghastly in the extreme. The farm is skirted on the north by the Grand River. From the appearance of the skulls, it would seem that their possessors died a violent death, as many of them were broken and dented. It could be from you bunch of clowns and what do they call them? These people that are skull seekers. Anyway, it's no wonder they're all busted up. The axes are shaped like tomahawks, small but keen instruments. The beads are of stone and are of all sizes and shapes. So if it's a bean and it's stone, if it's a stone bead, how did they drill a tiny hole in to make it a string of beads for a necklace? The pipes are not unlike in shape the putty pipe, and several of them are engraved with dogs' heads. They have not lost their virtue for smoking. Some people profess to believe that the Frieden Farm was formerly an Indian burial place, but the enormous stature of the skeletons and the fact that pine trees of centuries' growth cover the spot goes far to disprove this idea. Yeah, who beat up the giants? What's a mineral rod? Apparently kind of like one of those divining rods, like where you can find water. I think it sort of runs on that same principle, I believe. So yeah, giants. I found that interesting. So as mentioned at the top of the show, there was a couple of famous giants here in Canada, eh? And again, I'd never heard of these two. Well, there was a couple, and they were exhibited. They were sort of toured around and so on and so forth. But again, I never learned about these folks in school or anything like that. I had no idea. So I've got a few pictures here of just some of the earliest photos I could find of some of these burial mounds and earthworks. And then I've got some pictures of some giants. So I thought maybe we'd have a look at that real quick. See what you think of that. If you're just joining, welcome, and thank you very much for joining a guy here. Frankie, New West Reset Live, and this is episode 31. Looking at the ancient civilizations up here in Canada, one of which was ancient mound builders. And within some of these mounds, the skeletal remains, as well as a bunch of other, pipes, jewelry, and so on and so forth, of giants found in some of these. So as mentioned, I've got some photos of some of these earthworks and mounds, and then I've got some photos of a couple of famous Canadian giants. So this first photo is of those mounds in Vancouver, or on Vancouver Island, in Victoria. This one looking much larger, though, than, or is it maybe this one that might be this. But even this looks very suspicious to me. But anyway. These piles of boulders are big, huge, heavy boulders. Where did these come from? Guy wonders. Like, where did they get all these big, huge boulders from? Some of them not very impressive. More rocks than anything. Not big megalithic stones like we see down in some of the former Incan territories or anything. But again, that one photo, but you can see in the background, there's just like this whole area is just peppered with these things. So there's dozens and dozens of them. There's 300,000 in North America alone, Canada and the US. Now we're talking. This is a little bit more like it. It's one of those mounds in Ontario. Now this thing's huge, and you can definitely see that it's a structure of some kind. Now, whether it was purposely built like this and to be used as a burial mound or as a structure, I mean, I suppose the concept would be one and the same. Some more of those. These are kind of just not in any particular order. These are more from Victoria. This is near Ottawa. This is Mooney's Bay. Look at this thing. Now, this looks very similar to what Bernie was looking at in the southern Alberta Badlands around Medicine Hat. You can see it's almost like it's very reminiscent more of the Mississippian, or even getting down into the Aztec, where it's these sort of step structures. I always found that to be very, very interesting. Oh yeah, yeah. The books in the 50s and 60s and that were talking about giants. Newspaper articles like that in the 1880s, 90s, the 1920s even. But then, yeah, just a decade after, you jump from the 50s or 60s into the 70s, and they say, yeah, that's all just fake. There was no giants. All those giant remains found are just phonies. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I just found this to be very interesting and huge. This is one of the ones in Manitou, in Manitoba. Still quite impressive. There's another one. And you can see again, there's the Red River right there. This is all in that same area in Manitoba. All right, so here we go. Here's some giants. This is Miss Anna Swan, famous Canadian giant. Look at the size of this broad. She's got almost a very baffled look on her face. Poor thing. I'm not sure who this cat is. This might be the other Canadian giant. We'll have a look at him too. But you figure this woman, 5 foot, 5'3" maybe. So this guy maybe 5'6", 5'8". There's a great photograph of her. She's got a giant double chin. Pardon the pun. Of course, you get a Tom Thumb type character there, so she can hold him up in her hand. I think that's just a kid. They're making it look like it's a little person, but it's a kid. Maybe. Like, this guy's barely at her shoulder. So she's, a whole head. Well, 6 chins. Sorry. I'm sorry. 6 chins and a head higher than this guy. Huge. So let's Let's look into her for a second here and see what's the deal with this lady. See what's going on with her. Because I never heard of Anna Swan as well. They didn't teach us this stuff at all. This is Dictionary of Canadian Biography. We don't need to translate it to French. It's fine. So it's Anna Swan Haining Bates, giantess, born August 7th, 1846, Millbrook, Nova Scotia. One of 13 children of Alexander Swan and Anne Graham. June 1871, Martin, known as the Kentucky Giant, died in Ohio. Oh. Okay, that's interesting. Anna Swan's father had emigrated from Dumfries, Scotland to Nova Scotia. Her mother was Nova Scotian, whose ancestors came from the Orkneys. Anna's parents, the other children in the family, were normal in size, as was Anna herself as a baby. When she was 5 years old, however, Anna, the infant giantess, was 4 feet 8 inches tall and weighed over 100 pounds. At 22, she was 7 foot 6 inches tall and weighed 350 pounds. In 1862, in the Great American Showman, there he is, ladies and gentlemen, P.T. Barnum himself, heard about the Nova Scotian giantess. He sent an agent to New Annan, where she was then living, to bring the 16-year-old girl and her mother to New York. Besides the opportunity to earn $1,000 a month in 1862, that's a lot of cash. Being exhibited at the American Museum on Broadway, Anna, who wanted more education, was pleased by Barnum's offer to provide her with a private tutor for 3 months daily for 3 years. She also studied voice and piano. Barnum advertised Anna Swan as the tallest girl in the world, 8 feet 1 inch, dressed her in a costume made from 100 yards of satin and 50 yards of lace, and contrasted her with Commodore George Washington Morris Nutt, who was 29 inches tall and weighed 24 pounds. Anna was the only giantess in the world at that time, and she attracted large crowds to whom she enjoyed talking. Barnum wrote that she was an intelligent and by no means ill-looking girl, and during the long periods while she was in my employ, she was visited by thousands of persons. She was nearly burned to death when Barnum's museum was destroyed by the fire in 1865, of course. The stairs were in flames, and she was too large to escape through a window, but employees of the museum found a loft derrick nearby, smashed the wall around a window on the 3rd floor, and lowered the giantess by block and tackle, with 18 men holding the end of the rope. She went home to New Annan to recuperate, but returned soon after to New York's work in Barnum's new museum, which also burned in 1868. That summer, Anna visited her family and gave exhibitions in Nova Scotia before going back to the United States, where she went on tour. So she was pretty famous. Dead of consumption in 1888, she left an estate valued at $40,000. It's a lot of cash back in those days, man. Some of her clothing and jewels were distributed among her family and descendants, having allowed some articles to be displayed in the Sunrise Trail Museum in Tatamagouche, Nova Scotia, near her birthplace at Millbrook. Yeah, I'm sorry, but you know, what are you going to do, right? Oh, yeah, Barnum was like, yeah, he was the original Hollywood. That guy was the showman and all showman, that guy. Let's see what else we have here. There's another famous, Canadian giant named Angus MacAskill. which I think is the guy that was sharing that one photo with Anna Swan as well. Kind of look like him anyway. This is Angus here, obviously not this rather stout individual. Look at the size of this bugger. He's even taller. I wonder if this is the same guy as in that other photo. Let's go back here for a sec. No, this guy's got a... Okay. Look like the same guy for a second. Almost doing the hidden hand there. Eh? Which is the sign of the Freemasons, the hidden hand, which is the master of the second veil. Hey, Uki. Good to see you. Uki in the box. Thanks for shooting in and joining us here. God, everything was flammable back then. Yeah. Even circuses, even museums of oddities. Not the best pictures, unfortunately, because they're really small. So they get kind of pickleated a bit when a guy blows them up too much, but you get the idea. This guy was huge. And then you got to take a guy who's like 7+ feet tall and then put him in a top hat, a foot tall top hat. I think that was that for pictures for these guys. Yeah, I guess so. So let's see what we got on this guy. Angus McCaskill. He, call me crazy, but he sounds of Scottish descent as well. So what's with like Scottish Canadians being giants? Like what's that all about? It's from that same website, Dictionary of Canadian Biographies. Angus McCaskill, farmer, businessman, and Cape Breton giant. He was born in 1825 on Harris in the Hebrides, Scotland. Hebrides? I don't know. I'm sorry. One of 13 children of Norman McCaskill and Christina Campbell, a bachelor. 1863. Okay. About 1831, Angus immigrated with his family to Cape Breton, where his father was seeking better economic opportunities. If you're poor, how do you sail across the Atlantic, by the way, from the UK into Canada? Always wondered that. You always hear about these poor families, maybe indentured servitude or something. Norman McCaskill settled on a 100-acre farm on the south side of St. Anne's Harbor in a district called Englishtown because of its habits had not the Gaelic. So he attended the one-room school run by Alexander Monroe, a graduate of King's College. He was no larger than the other children as a boy, but he kept growing. At 14, he became known as St. Anne's Big Boy, or Gilmore, and he continued to grow in his 20s until he became so tall that his father lifted the roof of the family home and raised the ceilings of the kitchen and living room. Angus worked with his father and brothers in the family farm. He was also a fisherman. In a pioneer community which admired strength and had many strong men, he was called the Big Giant. Also, he wasn't just a giant, he was a big giant. And was remembered because he could carry a 60-foot beam on his shoulders, set 40-foot mast into a schooner, throw a man weighing 300 pounds over a woodpile 10 feet high and 12 feet wide, pull the bow off a fishing dory when a crowd of fishermen hauled back on the stern as a joke, and lift grindstones as easily as sugar lumps. Fortunately, he had the mild and gentle manner and was always helpful. Yeah, you don't want to just off a guy who's like 8 feet tall. So crop failures caused economic depression, so he accepted an offer to visit St. Anne's and go on tour as a curiosity. Toured Lower Canada, which is Ontario basically, and in 1850, United States. When he reached his full growth, his agents reported his height as 7 feet 9 inches, his weight at 425 pounds. His shoulders 44 inches wide, and the palm of his hand 8 inches wide and 12 inches long. Wow. Imagine that guy giving you a slap in the face. Yikes. Like, it's a good thing it's Frankie fingers and not Angus fingers, I guess, because that would just be Well, that would be ridiculous, you know. So what you're saying is Frankie Fingers is New West Reset?
Frankie Fingers is New West Reset. I don't understand. Okay, I've been trying to tell you. I'm trying to tell you, Frankie Fingers is New West Reset. New West Reset is Frankie Fingers.
So it's the same guy. Same guy.
Yes, it's the same guy, Mutt. What do you think? I've been trying to tell you. Frankie Fingers, New West Reset. Frankie Fingers, New West Reset. Okay?
All right, I got it. Jeez. Yeah, imagine that guy waving his hand around in your face. His hand's a foot long. In 1863, he was wearing boots size 17 and a half. Deep set blue eyes, a musical if somewhat hollow voice. Despite his huge size, he was perfectly proportioned. He was exhibited in the United States in the early 1850s by, you guessed it, P.T. Barnum in Philadelphia or in New York. He toured West Indies, Cuba. Descriptions of his presentation to Queen Victoria, however, are apocryphal. I don't even know what that means. Too fancy of a word for a guy. Could lift an anchor weighing 2,700 pounds. Wow. So yeah, I'd never heard of this guy either. But what's with all these people of Scottish descent that are Canadian, that are giants? It's crazy. What's in the water over there in Scotland? I wonder. Holy moly. That's a big dude. And that was a big broad. So there you go. A little bit of a look here at the mound builders and the giants of Canada. And that's just basically just skimming the surface. So again, I would encourage you to check out the links that I posted down in the description below there. All the links for everything. It's very interesting. Some of those articles are kind of a little bit, TLDR, too long, didn't read. I mean, there's some of them are pages and pages. So how's everybody doing in the box? What's going on here? Got internet person. What's he saying? A common military gesture having to do with the sword. Yeah. Oftentimes they would, I guess, especially if they were in the cavalry, which is a part of the infantry, I think. So infantrymen and cavalrymen would have a sword. Even once the horse was no longer used in cavalry divisions or whatever, they would still, for their ceremonial fancy dress attire, military dress or whatever, would have a sword, a saber or a sword. So let's see what's coming up on the channel here. Well, day after tomorrow, Sunday, is my tour of Heritage Park, which is sort of a pioneer museum, living museum, amusement park, kind of a dealio. Very, very interesting. Had a blast there, hanging out with my buddy Vincent. We were there all day. I think I wore out the poor guy. I mean, I'm used to running around all over the place doing boots on the ground. So on my day off, on a nice day, I might be out for like 4, 5, 6 hours, going to different locations, hitting up a couple of spots to film, for some boots on the ground video uploads for the channel. So I'm kind of used to it. But I don't know, Vincent, in his line of work, it's a physically demanding job. There's not a lot of just like walking endlessly. So he's using different muscle groups maybe or something. I don't know. But we definitely had a good time. It was a fascinating place. Fascinating. Orphan Annie says, been busy doing yard work for days. When it cools off or rains, I'll be back indoors. Yeah, well, it's it's the time of year. You got to get everything wrapped up, ready for the autumn or fall. Around here, winter. So everything's gonna be covered in snow, and the temperatures plummet well below 0 Celsius. Getting down into the -20, -30 sometimes. Hell, -40 with the wind chill. Celsius, that's cold, because -40 Celsius, I think, is also -40 in the Fahrenheit scale, I think. So that's bad. So yeah, if you can be outdoors now while the weather's beautiful, why not? That's what I do. Like I said, like even on my vacation, like I'm on my vacation right now. This is the second week of my holiday, my summer holiday. I go back to work Monday. And I took a couple of small trips, but I mostly wanted to stay here because I was just amped up to hit up a bunch of spots this summer, right? Like Heritage Park and Fort Calgary. And so it was a beautiful summer. And while the weather's good, I'll take advantage of it while I can, because it does not last long. That's for sure. So where are we at here? We're pretty much just a knuckle hair past the 2 hour mark. I think fella's getting ready to wind this thing down here for this evening. So once again, I want to thank all of you very, very much for shooting in, joining a guy here for New West Reset Live. Thanks to Old World Micmac for shooting in, as well as Liz and Turtle, Isabella Live. Thank you once again very much for the super chat. You broke my cherry. first super chat. Internet person and Team Heat, thank you very much. Great to see all of you. Bernie as well. Appreciate all the support and the feedback from Logan and stuff. I'm just scrolling through. I want to make sure I don't miss anybody here. Hidden in plain sight. Thank you. Headley Man out in BC. Yeah, we covered a little bit there on the Vancouver Island. Annie as well. Thanks again. Thanks for keeping an eye on things in the chat, by the way, Annie. We don't really get a lot of trouble out here anyways. But it's always good to have a mod or two just in case somebody's being a dick in the chat or something. So yeah, there you go. I think that is going to do it. So yeah, Sunday is the Heritage Park tour. It's about an hour and a half. So there's that. Monday, you've got that steam shovel digging out some old San Francisco tram tunnels or something hokey with that, with the horses hauling the dirt away. And later on in the month, of course, keep your ocular sphericals glued onto the channel here for the upcoming episode number 6 of the Knucklehead Show with myself, Frankie here at Old World, or myself, Frankie at New West Reset, and Chris at Old World Exploration. We're going to be looking at Brandon, Manitoba. So we're going to be kind of sort of in and around the neck of woods of where we're looking at with some of these mounds and these giants here tonight. Yeah, and the serpent mounds, that was crazy. I didn't know there were serpent mounds up here. Even those linear, the straight line ones, those two parallel ones, even those, like, I was just like baffled and befuddled, man. Baffled and befuddled. So, of course, every Wednesday is your midweek vintage footage. Every Friday here we're live, New West Reset Live. And every Sunday, boots on the ground. St. Patrick drove them out of Ireland. Yeah, there you go. You should have drove them out of here too. Get out of here, evil serpent, snake. So I think that is going to seal the deal here for tonight. Frankie, New West Reset, once again, thank you very much for all of your support. Appreciate it. If you haven't already, maybe on your way out, give a guy the old likey thumbs up thingy. Do all the other stuffs. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you're kind of watching this after the fact there, just let me know down below. If you could just kind of beep, boop, pop on the old keyboard. And until the next one, take care out there and have yourselves a good one. All right? We'll see you again soon. Cheers.